Hello and welcome back to another Spastic Kangaroo tutorial. Today I'm going to be teaching you about one of the new features in Blender 2.67, Freestyle. And Freestyle is a line rendering add-on engine thingy to create cartoon lines. So I've got my TARDIS here, and we're going to be rendering it with Freestyle so we get some nice cartoon edges. So to start, just check Freestyle. And then go to the new render layers panel and scroll down and create a line set. Now, the two major settings that we're going to be going over in this tutorial are the line sets and the line styles. And line sets are basically the areas that are going to have the lines drawn on them. So it's almost like the selection, and then the line style is the style of the actual line that gets drawn. So the line set chooses where to draw the line, and the line style styles the line. So if we just have the default settings, we'll have the silhouette rendered, the bordered rendered, and all creases. And this is what we'll get. So we've got a basic cartoon render now. So let's start at the top. Visibility is the way you choose whether you want the lines to be drawn on visible objects or invisible objects. So visible is the default, and this is what we'll get. But if we choose hidden, we can get lines drawn where we can't see. So what this is actually doing is it's drawing the back part of the TARDIS that we can't see. So, then we have QI range, which is, here, let me actually duplicate this. It's easier to see if you have more layers. And what it does is it will draw, it's basically a threshold to choose how far in you want to go. So if we start at layer 0 and draw to layer 2, we will get the first layer, the second layer, and the third layer of topology. So we will get the outside drawing of this, the outside of the foreground TARDIS. We'll get the part that's hidden in the foreground TARDIS, and we'll start seeing some silhouette for the background TARDIS. But if we were to say, I don't want to see the first two layers of the, I don't want to see the landing lines on the first TARDIS, only 2 layers in, which is going to be the start of the second TARDIS, and if we go to end at 3 from there, we'll only get an outline. If we go to 4, we'll get the outline and the background. And there we see we have the TARDIS being drawn. Oh, I meant 3 layers in. Oops. The background, a little bit of the foreground TARDIS, but we get a drawing mainly of the background TARDIS. So, again, Freestyle is crazy customizable, as you can tell in just the first 30 seconds of this video. I mean, it has a lot of settings. The documentation goes on for 10 or 12 pages. It's a ton. But yeah, as I said before, I can't get into all of it because there's so much. But yeah, let's get on to the edge types. Now, we can choose whether we want to draw the silhouette, and this is kind of just the well, I'm going to go through a list of all of these. So silhouette is basically the outline and the basic curvatures, and it doesn't really work on squarish objects too well. It tends to work on rounder things like Suzanne. So I'm gonna uncheck that one. Border will draw what are called open edges, and open edges are basically edges that are 1 vertex thick, and this TARDIS doesn't have any on it, so if I rendered this right now, you wouldn't get any lines on it. But if I had a plane, and then just quickly render this, we'll get a line. Oops, this is a grease pencil line, not a freestyle line. if we render it now, we'll get a line on the plane, but we won't get it on the TARDIS itself, and that's because the plane has an open edge. Oops. Oh, we still have the background TARDIS, and I don't want this plane. Alright. Next, we have contour, which will draw the outline, and this is the very outline, like the, just what I would call the silhouette. The silhouette is actually kind of broader than that in this, in Freestyle, but in the contour, if you choose contour, it will draw just the outside edges. And it will also draw any open edges inside. So if these windows were open edged, then it would be drawing a line there. Next, we have suggestive contours. Well, actually, I'll just render this quickly to show what I'm saying. And as you can see, I have the edges along the outside and only on the outside. Next, we have suggestive contours. And as far as I can tell, the documentation says it's where the lines would be drawn if the viewport was moved. And what I'm guessing that is it will like rotate the camera around and kind of guess where the lines would be drawn. But as far as I can tell, what it will basically do is just fill in some areas that aren't filled in. So it will kind of just add extra lines in kind of planar areas, valleys and stuff. And Virgin Valley does kind of the same thing. Again, using a different formula, a different mathematical function to do this, but I'm not exactly sure what it does. Anyway, the only times that I've used it is to fill in areas when I want more, I don't know, like just lines there. Next, we have crease, and don't be confused by this. These are all in the same group, is what I mean. So, crease is still part of this list. So crease will select sharp edges. If we render this, we'll get all the edges that are about 90 degrees-ish. Oh, wait, no. They have to be very, very, very sharp. We can set the crease angle threshold right here, and I want it to be 90. Actually, yeah, 90. And if we render this now, we will get some creases. So we get lines drawn here, 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 all over the place. So you can even draw lines on very, very flat shapes. So if I set it to 180 and then add a plane and then extrude that way, that is obviously not 90 degrees. It's a more subtle angle, and when we render this, we will get a line drawn right along that edge and along the backdrop and all over the place. So yeah, creases are basically ways of setting a crease value. Next we have edge mark, and what edge mark will do is it will draw a line where you mark. So I've recorded a tutorial before, so let me actually clear this quickly. It will allow you to draw lines on flat spots. So if I put a line right here, mark freestyle edge, and render, we'll get a line running along the mesh all the way from there to there. And with my testing, I haven't been able to make it work on edges that are being drawn already. So if the edge is already being drawn, it kind of gets canceled out. So just a heads up, I was running into problems with that before, so only mark flat areas. Next we have external contour, which will draw the external contour. It won't draw any of the inside areas. And we've got material boundary, so we can draw lines where the material splits. So when I render this, we'll get a line drawn along the windows because that's where I have material splitting. Can't really tell. Let me just color this a different color quickly. Pink. How about that'll stick out? And there you see it's being drawn along those windows. Alright. And then we also have the ability to choose areas that we don't want faces drawn on by marking them. So if we go in edit mode, select a face, press Ctrl F, and mark freestyle face, we can choose whether to draw or to not draw those. And then finally we have vertex groups, where we can choose vertex groups to be drawn or not drawn. And I'm not going to go explain those because they're kind of self-explanatory anyway. So yeah, let's get on to line styles. So the first thing, actually, I'm going to draw the external contour and how about the contour and silhouette. And if we render this, we'll just get a basic line going around a large section of the mesh. And I'm going to keep it pink just so you can see it. So yeah. Chaining is the way you can split the lines so that you can randomize them later, or you can like adjust their length or cut them out. It's makes the line essentially a chain and makes individual sections links. So if we disable this, you won't notice a difference in this render, and we will be getting back to this later, especially when we go over the modifiers. So you can see there's no difference right here. But let's enable chaining again so we can split the chain. And splitting is a way to basically split it depending on its length or its angle, or if it's on a material boundary. And then you can choose to make it a dash almost. So let's only split lines of the length of, say, 30. And I think this is in pixels. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it's in pixels. So then we'll have, here, let me just make this a little bigger so we can see it. Yeah, this is in pixels, so the first dash will be 20 pixels long, and then the gap will be 10 pixels. And this will be splitting them all and making them dashes. And as you can see, we have this nice dashed line going around our mesh now. We can also split based upon the angle. And if we split, we have the minimum angle and the maximum angle. And if we set the minimum angle to 30 and the maximum angle to, I don't know, 180, and render, we will get a bunch of splits along a lot of the angles that aren't very sharp. And that's what we get. So, yeah, a nice way to split up your mesh. But since we don't need chaining for this next bit, oh wait, actually we do, one more time. We can choose to not draw lines of a certain length, between a certain length. So let's say we don't want lines of 30 pixels. Actually, let's go a little higher because some of these lines are fairly long. But, yeah, so now we're not drawing this line around the edge right here because that is shorter than 40 pixels, and it's not drawing lines on certain other areas. So, yeah, another way to choose where you want your lines drawn. Next, we have the ability to choose which type of cap we want. I'm not going to be rendering each of these because, again, they're kind of self-explanatory, but we'll we'll cut the line off right at the end point of the line. So say this is the end point, it cuts it right off right there. Next, we have round. Round which will curve it, centering around the midpoint, and it'll draw the pink line and draw an extra pixel up here for a curvature. And then we find, oh shoot, I'm sorry, keep marking them. Then we have square, which will center it on that point. We'll center the flat cutoff on that point. Yeah, so that's caps. And then finally we have dashed line. And if you don't want to have to cut up your chain, then you can just simply choose dashed line and then choose what you want your lengths to be. When we render this now, we'll get that. And it's drawing some lines, so drawing some gaps here, dashing them, and so some of my recording got messed up after this, so I'm re-recording this bit, which is why everything looks very different. So yeah, I'm gonna pick up where we left off for the modifiers. So let's go. So modifiers. Well, first of all, color. You get the base color, which is the basic color of the line, and you can choose what color you want for that. I'm just gonna leave it at black, and we can add a modifier to this. And what modifiers do is basically what they do with meshes. They'll affect the outcome of the color, in this case, in a certain way. So let's choose a long stroke for first. And what this will do is it will, at the beginning of each stroke, it will draw it black, and then it'll gradient through to white. And when we render this, we'll get a bunch of lines with gradients on them. And this is a little bit thick right now, actually. Let me just adjust that. So yeah, that's a long stroke. That's how it'll affect the color along the stroke. You can affect the color based upon the distance from the camera. And this doesn't work very well right now because the TARDIS is kind of not very long in the Z direction. Well, from the camera's view. The ZZ direction, local Z. So we're gonna add a plane with a lot of distance out here, and we'll choose fill range by selection, and we'll add a cube back here. And now when we view from the camera, we'll just position this so that you can see it. And what will happen now is, I think the closer ones will be drawn in black. The line will be drawn black, and the farther away it is, you'll get a line drawn in white. So it's white up here, because that's farther away, and up here we have gray lines because that's closer. And right here at the very tip, we have black lines. So yeah, that's distance from camera modifier. Let me just delete this. I set up a new theme for myself, so it has more contrast and stuff. Hopefully it'll be easier to see stuff, and will be more visually pleasing to any of you who are watching it. So yeah, then we have distance from object, and this is exactly the same thing, except you instead choose an object instead of the camera. Next, we have a material, which will adjust the color to match the material. And for this one, I'm going to actually enable suggestive contours and ridges and valleys, just so you can see how this will be mixing. Let's turn the influence down slightly so you'll be able to see the original color still, but it will be showing, it will be mixing the color. And now you see we have lines being drawn, but they aren't all black, which is what we set the color to be. They are mixing with the image underneath, and actually are a little bit like either blue or yellow or gray or white, yellow, off-white, I guess. So yeah, those were all the modifiers for color. Next we have alpha, and we can set the alpha base transparency right here, and then we have all these same modifiers, but instead of affecting the color, they're affecting the alpha of the line. So I'll just do one example for you quickly. And here you see as the lines fade out, the lines will fade out as it is drawn along each stroke. Now here we have the thickness, and you've seen me adjust this slider a little bit already, and we can adjust the thickness of each base curve. Then we can choose whether we want it to be drawn inside, outside, or relative, whatever that means. Oh yeah, it means we've got a ratio to set. But we have all the same ones as before. Again, they'll just affect the thickness along the stroke, or the thickness depending on the distance from the camera, or the thickness depending on the distance from the object, or the thickness depending on the material. But we have one more modifier here called calligraphy. And what we can do is we can make it look like it's drawn with a calligraphy pen. Orientation, you can choose the orientation of the pen, you can choose the minimum thickness, and you can choose the maximum thickness, which I'm going to actually set a little bit higher. And now, when we render this, we will get a kind of calligraphy styled line drawn on this image. So we've got really, really thick lines right here. Let me adjust my grease pencil to be white. We've got really thick lines right here, and then thinner lines along here, or even thinner along here. And then we've got kind of medium thick right here. Yeah, so that's the calligraphy modifier. And finally, we have the geometry. And there aren't really any base settings for the geometry, since all the modifiers are going to be what is affecting it. Yeah, we've got a lot of modifiers for this one, so let's start from the top. Actually, let me scroll. Okay, yeah, start from the top. Tip remover is a way to shorten the length of the lines that are drawn. And you can kind of get away with it without chaining, but it works best with chaining. So yeah, enable chaining and then choose tip length. This is the amount you want to be removed. So if we set this to 15, you'll see we're getting some edges removed. Normally this line would be drawn all the way across, but now it's just being drawn from here on. And we have a line right here, and if you remember from before, it was being drawn all the way across the window. Now it's only being drawn across part of it. And so it's just a way of shortening lines. Next, we have spatial noise. And there's different kinds of noise in this, in the geometry modifiers, but basically all they do is randomize stuff. So I'm not really sure how much of a difference this is from Berlin noise, except it looks slightly different. You'll be able to see the difference. Here we have spatial noise, which is just basic randomness. And this one will kind of warp the entire thing and make it look all funny. Berlin noise is a little bit more, is a little bit different. So we'll actually save this in slot 2 and render Berlin noise in slot 1 when we get there. So let's just stay in slot 2 for now, though, for this image. And you can adjust the amplitude, that's how much you have. You can adjust the scale, which is the distance between each wobbliness, I guess. and then you can adjust the octaves, which is kind of like the detail. If you've ever used the randomize modifier in animation curves, this is kind of similar to that. So yeah, spatial noise. Now I'm going to just move to slot 1 so we can save that image and delete that. Next we have sinus displacement, which is again another randomizer. It'll look slightly different, and I think this one is a little bit more smaller details. I mean, you can obviously get that on the other one, but this one is sharper too. Yep, so that's sinus displacement. We now have sampling, which is a way to, according to the docs, it's a way to enhance the detail of the lines. And it's not really too apparent, but it will make some of the lines look a little bit smoother. And if you've got anti-aliasing issues, it should help with that too. Yep. So next we have polygonization, which, sorry, I don't really know how to pronounce that. But what it does is it will simplify the curves into hard edges. If you've ever, there's like a technique for simplifying a drawing in this manner. I'm going to actually turn off just the contours and ridges and valleys now because they're kind of just getting in the way. But yeah, polygonization, there's a way of simplifying a drawing based upon the like rough outline, kind of like this. What it'll do is you draw like a bunch of lines around on your paper around what it would look like. So I don't know, something similar to this. And this polygonization modifier will do a similar thing, only it will you can adjust the error of it too. So if you set the error lower, it will have more detail, and if you set the error higher, it'll have less. Next we have Perlin Noise 2D and Perlin Noise 1D. One direction and two directions is my guess, or one-dimensional, two-dimensional. So yeah, this is sort of similar to the other one. If we hit render, we're going to start with 2D, and we get this. And this one's a little bit more subtle than the sinus displacement, and looks more like it's drawn, I don't know, like with a marker almost. It's just my personal remark on that. Next we have, and obviously we've got frequency, amplitude. Amplitude is like the closeness between the randomness. Frequency is the amount it's going to do that. Seed is a way to adjust the randomized seed. Octaves, once more, is the amount of detail, and angle is the direction it's displaced in. So you can see most of them are being displaced in that direction or that direction. So next we're going to do the Perlin Noise 2D. I mean 1D, sorry. And this is going to be in just one direction. So it's a little bit less chaotic. As you can see, we really aren't having too much warping in this direction, but we're having a lot more of warping in that direction. So yeah, those are the Perlin Noise modifiers. Next we have guiding lines, and if you render this immediately without changing offset or anything, what you're gonna get is an image like this, kind of like a little bit like the polygonization modifier, although not exactly. So let's set the offset to a little bit higher, and when we render this now, we'll get this. So they're actually offsetting a little bit. And what this will do is, if you've got the original lines being drawn underneath, say like that, it'll look like you are drawing, you've got like sketch lines along it, kind of like, they call them guiding lines. So it'll look kind of like a sketch. You mainly use that for a sketchy type look. Next we have blueprint, and you can try, circles and ellipses will work pretty well on rounder things, but on a TARDIS, which is very square, it doesn't work so well. Well, it does kind of look like the Time Lord language, whatever that's called. So yeah, that's pretty neat. But we want to use square. And what this will do is it will draw kind of guiding lines, similar. It's similar to guiding lines, but it's a little bit more rigid, I think, is the best word for it. Yeah. So we can adjust the backbone length, and we've got another one called backbone stretcher farther down. And what the backbone is it's the length of each line, kind of, and you can stretch it so we can make this line longer, if we want. So if we set this one to 15 in render, the lines are a little bit longer, and it ends up being a little bit more warped because the random backbone has more to work on it. So yeah, that's the blueprint modifier. Next we have Bezier curve, and what this one will do is sort of similar again to the polygonization modifier. What it'll do is it'll try to draw the line that is originally drawn, except it's going to draw it with Bezier curves. So you'll end up with more wavy lines. You won't have sharp edges as much. And I guess it's kind of cool looking, but it works better on curved objects, I think. Next we have backbone stretcher, and as I told you before, it'll just stretch the length of the line. So if we set this to something crazy like 20 in render, we will get lines that are a lot longer than they would normally be drawn. We'll have lines sticking out like so. And we have 2D transform, which is a way to, stroke center is what I want, is a way to choose the scale and rotation of the lines. So, if we render this, except we have a rotation angle of 12 degrees, we'll get the line being drawn, except it's rotated and it's not lining up with the original image. And that's kind of like individual origins. We want, I don't know, probably absolute 2B dew point. I don't know. Next we have scale. So we can scale the lines. So let's reset that and scale all the lines 1.1. So now it'll kind of jut out a little bit. Oops. 1.1. There. So now the lines will kind of be off the mesh a little bit. It'll be offsetted more. And yeah, so that's a 2D transform modifier. And finally we have 2D offset. So we can choose to offset the line from the original drawing. That's not very much, so you won't really notice it. Let me set it to something that will actually do something. So let's set this to something like, yeah, 20. So it'll be offset on the y-axis by about 20 pixels. And we get this. So I've gone through all the modifiers and explained basically what everything does, but I'm going to give a few examples of how to use this now. First of all, a basic cartoon setup. And this is what I normally do for my cartoon renders. I'll have a base thickness for the outside line of the silhouette. I'll have that at pretty thick, have it at 8. And then I have a second line set in which I'll draw the silhouette, I'll draw creases, and I'll draw it a little bit thinner, so we'll have 2. And when we render this, we'll get a really thick line around the entire mesh, and then we'll get some thinner ones inside. And it actually looks thicker because I don't know why it does that. What did I must have left on a setting in here. Huh. Oh, I said silhouette. I wanted contour. I didn't want silhouette. This is what I want right here. So there you go. We get a thick line around it and a cartoon drawing inside. So yeah, this is my most basic and probably my favorite setup of all these three. Next, this is more of a useful one than one that you'd actually ever use. This is going to create a wireframe. So Control 8, mark Freestyle Edge, select everything and mark for Freestyle Edge, and we can draw. We can just draw the wireframe. So let me set the alpha a little bit lower so it's not so heavy, and you can actually see the mesh. When we render this now, we'll get the lines being drawn over the entire object. The alpha is a little bit too low, and the thickness was still at 8, so I have to set that to 2. Anyway, when we render this quickly, we'll get the wireframe of the mesh right here, which is really cool because it's great for presenting your wireframe if you need to do that. Instead of having to worry about duplicating meshes and drawing wires and especially that's I never really did wireframes simply because it's pretty annoying. Or what I do is I just draw what was in here, and this isn't always as accurate. So yeah, that's how to create a wireframe for your render. Finally, we're going to go over cartoon sketchy type look. And here we have the sketch type look. And I'm not going to be going over each individual value because it took a little bit of tweaking to get this working. But I will show you the basic idea. So first of all, we have the a simple line being drawn along the entire surface, and it is influenced by the color a little bit. As you can see, this line right here, right there, and here, those are from that line set. Next, we have the blueprint, which will draw these extra lines right here, and I set the rounds to 2, so I get 2 lines being drawn instead of just 1. And then I randomized the backbone a little bit so we'd get a sketchier look. And finally, I had one more that would just offset slightly so it looks like a ghost line. And this one was kind of to just look like the artist made a mistake and then fixed it again. Yep, so that's all I have for you guys this tutorial. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. If you ran into any trouble or if you wonder what a certain value slider does, be sure to comment below and I'll be happy to answer that question. And as you can tell, I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, so if you're also a fan, it would be cool if you said which your favorite Doctor was. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys this time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next tutorial.